This may be the most successful assassin of our times. It was a crisp summer's day in July 2022, and former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was out on the campaign trail, speaking on behalf of a political candidate ahead of an election that coming weekend. As this kingpin of Japanese politics delivered his speech, he was abruptly cut off by the unfamiliar sound of gunfire. The crowd were absolutely stunned. Political violence never happens in modern-day Japan, but for Abe, fate had decided differently. Hit twice in the neck, the former Prime Minister was dead within hours. The level of shock was near indescribable. Abe, a staunch conservative and militarist, had dominated Japanese politics for over a decade. In that time, he had been no stranger to ruffling a few feathers, seeking to revise the constitution, revive the military, and increase Japan's prestige on the world stage. But Abe and the Liberal Democratic Party which he led also held a dark secret, a deeply embedded and hidden relationship with a religious cult that had caused harm to a great many families within Japan. It was this secret affiliation that fixated the assassin on his target, an affiliation that would soon come to light and change Japan forever. Today we look at the assassination of Shinzo Abe, a killing that would shake Japan to its core. Shinzo Abe was no ordinary politician, a commanding and unflappable figure destined to get his hands on power and then to divide it. Born in 1954, he entered the world into one of Japan's most prominent political families. His father was a future foreign minister, whilst his great-uncle and grandfather both served as Japan's prime minister. All of them represented the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, an alliance of conservatives and nationalists who have ruled Japan almost uninterrupted for the past 70 years. Few had a bigger impact on Abe than his powerful grandfather, Nobusuke Kishi, a politician whose past was drenched in crime and controversy. During the Japanese occupation of the Chinese territory of Manchuria in the 1930s, Kishi had been responsible for large-scale forced labour of the native population, later being arrested as a war criminal. But rather fortunately for him, as the Cold War began to develop, the victorious Americans saw some use for his fiercely anti-communist views and leadership abilities, and he was not put on trial. In 1955 he was central to the LDP's creation, laying the foundations of the political system and ideology that would one day become central to his grandson's rule. For Shinzo Abe's path was virtually inevitable. In 1993, Abe was elected to the House of Representatives, the lower house of Japan's national diet. Self-assured and ambitious, his ascension of the ladder to power was only a matter of time, and in 2006 he was chosen as Prime Minister, Japan's youngest since the Second World War. But far from being a pillar of strength and stability, Abe's first term would instead be one of humiliation. Between scandals involving government mismanagement of pensions and his own personal health problems, Abe was forced to resign after just a year in the job, his party's popularity on the floor. It's fair to say that this had not been the best premiership. In fact, Abe was haunted by it. He had failed to achieve so much of what he set out to, a man with such an intense focus on national strength, who had fallen from power with a whimper. But luckily for Abe, a second chance was on its way. In 2012, during one of their extremely rare periods out of government, the LDP once again elected him as leader. The governing Democratic Party had near enough fallen apart during their 3 years in office, and in December 2012, the LDP returned to power in a landslide. Abe was back. And so began the feather ruffling that best encapsulated Abe's brand of politics, from his Abenomics to shake up the economy, to his belief in an internationally powerful Japan. This belief in national strength largely focused on one thing: the military. Since World War II, Japan's constitution had contained a clause stating that the military was only to be used in a defensive capacity, broadly known as Article 9 or the Pacifist Clause. In 2015 he reinterpreted this clause, making it easier for the Japanese self-defense forces to potentially fight in nearby wars that threaten Japan's security. Speaking of militarism, He also infuriated many in China and Korea for his attitude of revisionism towards Japanese war crimes that had been committed against them. His visit to the Yasukuni Shrine, which bears the name of some of Japan's most notorious war criminals, only angered them further. By advocating such a potent blend of militarism and nationalism, it would seem that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in Abe's family. In modern Japan, many were horrified by his ideas. No wonder he was so divisive. By 2020, his health once again failing, he decided to resign, leaving office as Japan's longest-serving Prime Minister. He remained a towering figure in Japanese politics, and to LDP candidates, having Abe's endorsement was like gold dust. In the city of Nara on the morning of July 8, 2022, endorsing a candidate is exactly what Abe was doing. As he delivered a speech to a crowd of supporters, nobody took any notice of the fidgety man stood just meters behind him. With the security apparently not bothering to do its job properly, the man quickly spotted his opportunity. Raising a homemade shotgun put together with 2 pipes and black tape, he fired in Abe's direction, hitting him twice in the neck. Although initially responsive and quickly rushed to hospital, it was too late. Within hours of the shooting, Shinzo Abe, a true giant of Japanese politics, passed away at the age of 67. But if you think it was his divisive rhetoric and hawkish policies that led to this shocking murder, well, surprisingly you'd be wrong. For his assassination was not motivated by political reasons whatsoever. Instead, behind it sat a simmering anger at the secret power and influence of a group that Abe was associated with. A secret that would rock Japanese politics to its core. The assassination of Shinzo Abe quickly made headlines around the world. In Japan, the atmosphere was one of horror and disbelief. This was a modern, safe, and democratic society, one that had not witnessed this kind of political violence in decades. Gun deaths were virtually unheard of. That someone was willing to go through the effort of building a weapon themselves must speak volumes of their desire to kill and their grievances. The man in question was 41-year-old Tetsuya Yamagami. After initial questioning, the police told reporters that Yamagami held a grudge against a specific organisation. This would only fuel the fires of speculation. Who were this group that had wronged a man so much that he felt compelled to commit such a heinous act? And what did Shinzo Abe have to do with any of it? The answer to that first question is the Unification Church. This shadowy religious cult was founded in 1950s South Korea by a man named Sun Myung-moon, a man who proclaimed himself to be the Messiah. The church's followers are often referred to as Moonies. From its Korean origins, it spread to Japan and amassed a large following, gaining attention in the 1980s and 90s for its mass wedding ceremonies involving thousands of couples. But at the heart of the Unification Church sat a dark practice. Extreme manipulation of its members for immense financial gain. The church became known for selling cheap goods to its members at extortionate prices, but later, the focus instead shifted to forced donations. One tactic of the church was to learn about individual people's struggles and then blame this on the sins of their ancestors, claiming that only a donation to the church would absolve them of these sins. In Japan especially, being shown images of war crimes committed against the Koreans was often enough to instill guilt in people, the same war crimes that Abe had sought to hide from them. In the late 1990s, Tetsuya Yamagami's mother became one such victim of this manipulation. Perhaps using these very same tactics, the church coerced her to part with 100 million yen, or $720,000, along with several other assets. She declared bankruptcy in 2002, and her children were hit hard. Yamagami was unable to go to university, and many years later, his brother tragically committed suicide. His story was a truly sad and heartbreaking one, and brings us on to the second question. What did Abe have to do with any of it? The link once again dates back to Abe's famous grandfather. In the 1960s, he developed connections with the group and became a personal friend of Moon, helping the church to establish a base in Japan. United in their shared beliefs of strong family values and uncompromising anti-communism, the Unification Church and the LDP began an association that would last for decades. Through its army of political volunteers, the church was able to have substantial political influence, effectively giving young and ambitious LDP candidates a leg up into electoral politics. Sat somewhere in this dynamic was, of course, Shinzo Abe. Whilst not a Unification Church member, in 2021 he sent a pre-recorded video message to one of the group's events, praising the church for its commitment to family values. A few years beforehand, Abe's government had even approved an application by the group to change its name, likely because the name Unification Church had become so tainted inside Japan. They renamed themselves the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, greatly angering their many opponents. Originally, Yamagami had wanted to kill Moon's widow, Hakja-han. After realising that this would be extremely difficult, he then looked into Abe's connections with the church, and from that moment, the former Prime Minister's fate was sealed. In some ways, Abe's death marked the end of an era, but at the same time, it would become the starting gun that would blow the lid on a monumental political scandal. For the Moonies and their connections with the LDP were back in the public eye, paving the way for intense scrutiny, and leading to the tragic Yamagami becoming one of the most successful assassins in the history of the world. As news began to spread that the Moonies were the source of the anger that had fueled one of Japan's most shocking political murders, it drew a reaction of bewilderment and surprise. To many in Japan, their influence had seemed to fade after the turn of the century. This revelation from the assassin that they were still closely tied to the country's most powerful politicians began to draw questions that demanded answers. As the pressure grew, the LDP leader and Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida ordered an internal investigation. Shockingly, almost half of the LDP's 379 representatives in Japan's National Diet were found to have links with the church. It penetrated the heart of the government so deeply that several church-linked members of the cabinet were removed from their position within weeks. The LDP's scramble to dissociate themselves from the Unification Church accelerated. A few months after the assassination, a law was passed preventing religious groups from maliciously soliciting donations. To many in Japan, including lawyers who had fought the group and recovered millions of dollars of forced donations, this law was flawed and did not go far enough. Then, in November 2022 came perhaps the biggest announcement of all. The government would conduct an inquiry into the church, including looking at its finances and methods of operation, potentially revoking its status as a religious organisation. How far could this go? Only 2 religious organisations in Japan had ever faced this fate, both of those only coming after criminal charges had been pressed against their leaders. The inquiry would uncover the huge extent of public harm that the church was responsible for, built up through a long and twisted history of manipulation and coercion. Following the investigation, in March 2025 came the landmark decision that Yamagami will have dreamt of. A Tokyo court ordered that the Unification Church should be dissolved. Whilst the group can still technically operate in Japan, this ruling means that it will lose its tax-exempt privileges and face liquidation of its assets. Although the church are likely to appeal the ruling, it most certainly marks the end of their cosy relationship with the all-powerful LDP, as well as their exploitation of families throughout Japan. But for many families who suffered a similar fate to Yamagami's, this decision is simply too little, too late. Following these years of turbulent investigations, it's not hard to see why this scandal enraged the Japanese public and shook them to their core. Despite trying to wash their hands of the church connection, the LDP took a hit to their popularity, and so, by extension, did Shinzo Abe. So quick was this change in emotions that even the decision to give Abe a state funeral triggered a wave of criticism and protests. The change in attitude towards Yamagami was just as dramatic. An assassin at first reviled, and now at the very least understood, and recognised by many as having legitimate grievances. When considering all of the damage that has been inflicted upon the Unification Church in the years since, it would be difficult to argue against Yamagami being one of the most successful assassins in history, his aims ultimately achieved. The assassination of Shinzo Abe was one of the most unusual, unexpected, and ultimately effective assassinations in modern history. An unthinkable killing in a country where modern political violence is completely unheard of. A putrid smell of corruption and entanglement in one of the world's brightest beacons of democracy. And above all else, an assassin at first hated and later understood. An assassin who tipped the balance of society's moral compass with his honest and tragic motive, at the same time bringing to light one of the darkest, most scandalous secrets of Japanese politics. An assassin who goes down as one of the most successful that history has ever seen. As always, we hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more from the Assassinations Archive.